Chips, A Bargain with the Devil by Charles Dickens. There was once a shipwright, and he wrought in a government yard, and his name was Chips. And his father's name before him was Chips, and his father's name before him was Chips, and they were all Chipses. And Chips the father had sold himself to the devil for an iron pot and a bushel of tenpenny nails and 1/2 ton of copper and a rat that could speak. And Chips the grandfather had sold himself to the devil for an iron pot and a bushel of tenpenny nails and 1/2 ton of copper and a rat that could speak. And Chips the great-grandfather had disposed of himself in the same direction on the same terms, and the bargain had run in the family for a long, long time. So, one day, when young Chips was at work in the dock slip all alone, down in the dark hold of an old 74 that was hailed up for repairs, the devil presented himself and remarked, "A lemon has pips, and a yard has ships, and I'll have Chips." I don't know why, but this fact of the devil's expressing himself in rhyme was peculiarly trying to me. Chips looked up when he heard the words, and there he saw the devil with saucer eyes that squinted on a terrible great scale, and that struck out sparks of blue fire continually. And whenever he winked his eyes, showers of blue sparks came out, and his eyelashes made a clattering like flints and steels striking lights. And hanging over one of his arms by the handle was an iron pot, and under that arm was a bushel of tenpenny nails, and under his other arm was 1/2 ton of copper, and sitting on one of his shoulders was a rat that could speak. So the devil said again, "A lemon has pips, and a yard has ships, and I'll have Chips." The invariable effect of this alarming tautology on the part of the evil spirit was to deprive me of my senses for some moments. So Chips answered never a word, but went on with his work. "What are you doing, Chips?" said the rat that could speak. "I'm putting in new planks where you and your gang have eaten old away," said Chips. "But we'll eat them too," said the rat that could speak, "and we'll let in the water and drown the crew, and we'll eat them too." Chips, being only a shipwright and not a man-of-war's man, said, "You're welcome to it." But he couldn't keep his eyes off the 1/2 ton of copper or the bushel of tenpenny nails, for nails and copper are a shipwright's sweethearts, and shipwrights will run away with them whenever they can. So the devil said, "I see what you're looking at, Chips. You'd better strike the bargain. You know the terms. Your father before you was well acquainted with them, and so were your grandfather and great-grandfather before him." Says Chips, "I like the copper and I like the nails, and I don't mind the pot, but I don't like the rat." Says the devil fiercely, "You can't have the metal without him, and he's a curiosity. I'm going." Chips, afraid of losing the 1/2 ton of copper and the bushel of nails, then said, "Oh, give us hold." So he got the copper and the nails and the pot and the rat that could speak, and the devil vanished. Chips sold the copper, and he sold the nails, and he would have sold the pot, but whenever he offered it for sale, the rat was in it, and the dealers dropped it and would have nothing to say to the bargain. So Chips resolved to kill the rat. And, being at work in the yard one day, with a great kettle of hot pitch on one side of him, and the iron pot with the rat in it on the other, he turned the scalding pitch into the pot and filled it full. Then he kept his eye upon it till it cooled and hardened, and then he let it stand for 20 days, and then he heated the pitch again and turned it back into the kettle, and then he sank the pot in water for 20 days more, and then he got the smelters to put it in the furnace for 20 days more, and then they gave it him out red hot, and looking like red hot glass instead of iron. Yet there was the rat in it, just the same as ever, and the moment it caught his eye, it said with a jeer, "A lemon has pips, and a yard has ships, and I'll have chips." For this refrain I had waited since its last appearance with inexpressible horror, which now culminated. Chips now felt certain in his own mind that the rat would stick to him, and the rat, answering his thought, said, "I will, like pitch." Now, as the rat leapt out of the pot when it had spoken and made off, Chips began to hope that it wouldn't keep its word. But a terrible thing happened next day. For when dinner-time came and the dock bell rang to strike work, he put his rule into the long pocket at the side of his trousers, and there he found a rat, not that rat, but another rat. And in his hat he found another, and in his pocket-handkerchief another, and in the sleeves of his coat, when he pulled it on to go to dinner, 2 more. And from that time he found himself so frightfully intimate with all the rats in the yard that they climbed up his legs when he was at work, and sat on his tools while he used them, and they could all speak to one another, and he understood what they said. And they got into his lodging, and into his bed, and into his teapot, and into his beer, and into his boots, and he was going to be married to a corn chandler's daughter, and when he gave her a work-box he had himself made for her, a rat jumped out of it, and when he put his arm round her waist, a rat clung about her, so the marriage was broken off, though the banns were already twice put up, which the parish clerk well remembers, for as he handed the book to the clergyman for the second time of asking, a large fat rat ran over the leaf. By this time a special cascade of rats was rolling down my back, and the whole of my small listening person was overrun with them. At intervals ever since, I have been morbidly afraid of my own pocket, lest my exploring hand should find a specimen or two of those vermin in it. You may believe that all this was very terrible to Chips, but even all this was not the worst. He knew besides what the rats were doing, wherever they were, so sometimes he would cry aloud when he was at his club at night, "Oh, keep the rats out of the convicts' burying ground, don't let them do that," or "There's one of them at the cheese downstairs," or "There's 2 of them smelling at the baby in the garret," or other things of that sort. And at last he was voted mad, and lost his work in the yard, and could get no other work. But King George wanted men, so before very long he got pressed for a sailor, and so he was taken off in a boat one evening to his ship, lying at Spithead ready to sail. And so the first thing he made out in her as he got near her was the figurehead of the old 74, where he had seen the devil. She was called the Argonaut, and they rode right under the bowsprit, where the figurehead of the Argonaut, with a sheepskin in his hand and a blue gown on, was looking out to sea. And sitting, staring on his forehead, was the rat who could speak, and his exact words were these: "Chips ahoy, old boy, we've pretty well eat them too, and we'll drown the crew, and we'll eat them too." Here I always become exceedingly faint, and would have asked for water, but that I was speechless. The ship was bound for the Indies, and if you don't know where that is, you ought to it, and angels will never love you. Here I felt myself an outcast from a future state. The ship set sail that very night, and she sailed and sailed and sailed. Chips's feelings were dreadful. Nothing ever equalled his terrors. No wonder. At last, one day, he asked leave to speak to the Admiral. The Admiral give leave. Chips went down on his knees in the great state cabin. "Your Honour, unless your Honour without a moment's loss of time makes sail for the nearest shore, This is a doomed ship, and her name is the Coffin." "Young man, your words are a madman's words." "Your honour, no, they are nibbling us away." "They?" "Your honour, them dreadful rats. Dust and hollowness where solid oak ought to be. Rats nibbling a grave for every man on board. Oh, does your honour love your lady and your pretty children?" "Yes, my man, to be sure." "Then for God's sake make for the nearest shore, for at this present moment the rats are all stopping in their work, and are all looking straight towards you with bare teeth, and are all saying to one another that you shall never, 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 never see your lady and your children more." "My poor fellow, you're a case for the doctor. Sentry, take care of this man." So he was bled, and he was blistered, and he was this and that for 6 whole days and nights. So then again he asked leave to speak to the Admiral. The Admiral give leave. He went down on his knees in the great state cabin. "Now, Admiral, you must die. You took no warning, you must die. The rats are never wrong in their calculations, and they make out that they'll be through at 12 tonight. So you must die with me and all the rest." And so, at 12 o'clock, there was a great leak reported in the ship, and a torrent of water rushed in, and nothing could stop it, and they all went down, every living soul. And what the rats, being water rats, left of Chips, at last floated to shore, and sitting on him was an immense overgrown rat, laughing, that dived when the corpse touched the beach, and never came up. And there was a deal of seaweed on the remains, and if you get 13 bits of seaweed, and dry them, and burn them in the fire, they will go off like in these 13 words, as plain can be: "A lemon has pips, and a yard has ships, and I've got chips."